I'm happy to invite you to a conference on preaching and teaching the New Testament use of the Old Testament to be held April 28th at the Hope Center in Plano, Texas. This conference is sponsored by Reformed Theological Seminary, by Mere Ministries, and by Town North Presbyterian Church of America in Richardson, Texas. This conference is mainly to make people who are concerned to preach and teach the Bible, to help them be more aware of allusions. When you think of the New Testament use of the Old, you usually focus on quotations, and sometimes people miss the allusions that are in a text. In fact, there are many more references to the Old Testament and the New that are allusions than are quotations. And so we want to focus on this. And one of the things we will do is we will have a message at the beginning on, so what difference does this make? Why is this so important? Secondly, we'll talk about the different ways the New Testament uses the Old. Thirdly, we'll have a message on steps to interpreting the New Testament use of the Old. And then we'll have a workshop session where we'll give each person the same passage, and they will try to use the methodology we've talked about in the earlier messages, and then we will discuss it after everyone's worked on it for a while. We'll conclude in the evening with a message called Finding Christ in the Old Testament. Is he to be found in every verse or just in the direct messianic prophecies? Interspersed throughout will be refreshments, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, as well as question and answer sessions. But to give an example of the kind of thing we're going to talk about, when Paul uses the word church, it comes from the Greek word ecclesia, which refers many times in the Old Testament Greek to the congregation of Israel. But Paul uses that phrase church, ecclesia, for the congregation of the New Testament, which is translated church in the New Testament. In fact, about 11 times he uses the phrase church of God, ecclesia tou theou. And that's only found in one place in the Old Testament, Nehemiah 13:1, where Israel, the church of God, the ecclesia tou theou, is worshiping by hearing the Old Testament taught to them. And so when Paul applies this phrase to the church, for example, at Corinth and at other places, in chapter 1 of 1 Corinthians, he applies it to the church at Corinth. And there he is saying that the church there is the continuation of the church of the Old Testament. The New Testament church is one with the people of God of the Old Testament. We are the true Israel because this word refers to the congregation of Israel. And their book was the Old Testament. Our book is the Old Testament just as much. But now we have that Old Testament interpreted through the lens of the coming of Jesus Christ. And so it's very important if you're teaching or preaching to note this phrase in the margin, for example, of 1 Corinthians 1 in about the second verse. And then the next verse, you have the phrase, Paul says, this is not only to the church of God, but to all the ones who call upon the name of the Lord. That's another allusion. It's not a quotation. It's not set apart in caps. And it refers to Joel 3:5, which refers to Israel calling upon God's name in the end time. That end time has come. And so the church of God is calling upon the name of God as true end time Israel. We are the people of God in continuity with the Old Testament people of God. And why are we true Israel? Because Jesus is true Israel. And when we come into union with Jesus Christ, we become true Israel. So I hope that you can make this conference. That's just a very small example of the kind of thing we're going to be talking about. I hope to see you there.